as far as his influence and his impact on the guitar world, it's so you kind of can't comprehend how big it was, because when you think about all the guitar players that there are, electric guitar players, and you can only name like a couple. I mean, most people will probably point to two that were like game-changing, paradigm-shifting like moments. You know, Hendrix and like Van Halen, and people can argue that there's other people. I get it, but like there'll never be somebody like that again. You know, so his influence globally on the guitar community is just it's unfathomable. Guitar was never the same.
He was a total example for me. He was the best rhythm guitar player ever, and Van Halen 1 had the best guitar sound ever. So yeah, he was a huge influence. I loved Van Halen. He's actually related somehow. He's part of the... Yeah, we are related. An uncle of me told me, "Oh, Jan Van Halen, I know him, and he's my nephew." So there is some kind of a relationship, yeah.
I was a huge Van Halen fan. It doesn't really show in the Sepultura's music. It's more like a personal fan relationship. I used to collect cassettes of live Van Halen bootlegs. And I loved the bootlegs more than the records, because the live versions were so more amazing. They play so much cooler live.
I mean, it saddens me to know that I'll never get to see him play again. You know, that he died young, and you know, we have his music to remember him by, but you know, watching him play is really an incredible experience.
We realized the impact he was having then, you know, when he first hit the scene. I was probably in high school or college when I first heard Eruption, and it just blew us all away. We couldn't understand it. It wasn't just the tapping. It was the rock and roll attitude in the guitar parts, you know, the bulletproof, supreme rhythm playing, where every note in a chord explodes and they're in tune and they sound amazing. It was in his tone, you know, the way that he presented. He heard it in his head that way, and he presented the guitar on a silver platter.
His sound on the first album, I never heard a better sound than that, you know. And it was so easy, just a guitar, an amp, and a mic, and how he did it, I have no idea. So sound-wise, then of course you had his tapping technique, which you never heard of before. And it was, how does he do it? And then you find out how he does it. And but also just the songs, you know, and together with David Lee Roth, it was magic, you know, those two.
I'll never forget when I heard Eruption for the first time, and I wasn't experienced enough as a guitarist. I couldn't wrap my head around that being a guitar. It didn't sound like a guitar to me. I was like, how is anybody doing that? Like, it sounded like a keyboard or something, you know. And there's no YouTube, or, you know, I was too young to like go to a concert, so I couldn't see what he was doing, and I'm just hearing all these notes flying by. And again, I didn't have the experience, so I didn't know there was a phaser on the sound and like a tape delay, and all I heard was this like, you know, cascading flurry of notes, and it was just mind-blowing. I never heard anything like that before. So to me, you know, creatively and as a guitar player, it was just like, it sucked me in. I was like, how do you do that? How in the world is somebody doing that? And then you begin to explore. So he was a big influence on me, for sure.
This was all very different for us at the time. You know, we had big, heavy guitars and all that kind of thing, but nothing as free sounding and effervescent and intense.
Eddie was such a wonderful compositional improviser, and he was obviously a really great composer on the guitar. You know, he figured out a way to write these really fun songs, but they were really groundbreaking in how he arranged his guitar parts. You know, you can hardly find any songs where he's strumming and then overdubbing some other part. You know, it's a very different way of playing. He's in a trio, and he's trying to fill up the space with a kind of a orchestral style of playing.
His guitar parts are like completed orchestra arrangements in a way, you know, and they play so well. I mean, they're beautiful, beautiful guitar parts.
You know, I've seen interviews with him, and you really can see what of an innovative mind he had, and how the things that he came up with amplifiers and technique were all out of curiosity and like asking questions and like, hey, how come nobody ever did this before? Or I have this idea, I want to be able to do this. I wonder how you can do it. So he was like this, you know, scientist, you know, at the same time. And that's a really cool side to see. If you've ever seen interviews with him, it's really interesting to watch.
Then, of course, when he goes to solo, we know from his interviews that he improvised, and he tried to capture the spirit of the song and of the band, I guess, of the live event, which is a whole kind of style in itself. You know, it's very, very different than, you know, like a Pink Floyd, you know, the way David Gilmour would approach a song. All equally valid, but uniquely different. And the odd thing about Eddie is that sometimes he would play stuff that didn't make any musical sense, but made sense in terms of how much fun it was to listen to. You know, when you heard the whole band, you went, oh, that's so much fun. But if you go back and let's say you learn it note for note, you go, that doesn't make any sense at all. You know?
He was a sweet soul and a good friend of mine. You know, the times that we actually did have a chance to hang out together a little bit. And he was just, he has all this joy that he brought into his playing. Yeah. You know, that big smile on his face all the time was so infectious and so, I don't know, so different from a lot of rock and roll players. He had his own joy that he brought to the music that he created that was so different from so much else that was happening in music.
You know, there are no rules in music. There's just cause and effect. That's really what it is. And I think he understood that more than most people. He would never get held back by any kind of preconception that there was a rule, you know, that stopped you from doing this chord or that note or whatever. He just went with what felt right and what sounded right. And his sense of timing was like probably the best I'd heard in decades. When he came along, I was like, well, wow, that guy's got a right hand of doom.
Free, but solid, you know, and expansive as Edward, you know. So we didn't know then because he hadn't written all the great songs that the band ended up writing, which created their legacy, you know. But yeah, it was a game changer.